I apologize for the delay. It's entirely attributable to me. Okay, call your next witness. Yes, Your Honor. The government calls Mohammed Stewart. Mohammed Stewart, called as a witness by the government, having been duly sworn, testified as follows. Be seated. Pull the chair up to the mic. Tell us your name. Mohammed Stewart. Spell Stewart. Stewart. You may inquire. Good afternoon, Mr. Stewart. Good afternoon. How old are you? 36. Please be sure to keep your voice up so we can all hear you. Where were you born? Brooklyn, New York. Where did you live when you were growing up? Brooklyn, New York. What part of Brooklyn? Crown Heights. Who did you live with when you were growing up? Pretty much with my mother, on and off with my father. And where do you live right now? In Georgia. Are you employed? I work for myself. And how are you employed? What do you do? I opened up a used car lot. And what do you do in that capacity? Rent cars, sell cars. All used cars? Yes. When did you open up that used car business? Late 2013. Were you employed before that? Yes. How were you employed before that? I was a general manager of a rent-to-own store, and before that, doing landscaping. All in Atlanta or in Georgia? Yes. Have you ever committed crimes in your life, Mr. Stewart? Yes. How long have you held steady legal employment? On and off since my arrest. Which was when? 2010, April 2010. Are you currently on bail, having pled guilty to certain crimes? Yes. Which crimes did you plead guilty to? Pled guilty to possession of a weapon, drug conspiracy, and possession of a weapon in furtherance of drug conspiracy. And do you see anyone in the courtroom today who you recognize? Yes. Who do you see? I see Jimmy Rosemond and Tori. And can you identify the person that you called Jimmy Rosemond? Yes. Where is he? Can you point out an item of clothing that he's wearing? Dark-colored suit directly in front of me. There's a lot of people in dark-colored suits, so what row are we talking about? Next to the attorney. Next to which attorney? Right here. Okay. What row? Second row. Second row. And how many seats in from? The second seat from the second, indicating Mr. Rosemond. To the right. And then how many seats in from the aisle do you see Tori? The fourth in the second row, the fourth seat over to the right in the second row. May the record reflect that the defendant identified Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson. Mr. Stewart, why are you testifying here today? Because of an agreement that I signed with the government. What kind of agreement is that? A cooperation agreement. Let's go into your background, Mr. Stewart. When did you start committing crimes? As a child. How old were you? 6, 7 years old, maybe. What kind of crimes did you commit as a child? Property theft. What other crimes? Assaults. What about as you got a little older? What about the crimes that you committed, let's say, between the ages of 15 and 18? Stealing, robbery, selling small amounts of drugs, assaults, stuff like that. Were you involved in any shootings during that period? Yes. About how many? At that time, maybe a number of them, maybe 2 or 3 that I can remember. What's the first such shooting you remember that you committed under the age of 18? I think I had one out in Coney Island projects. What happened with that? Some guys were coming out of a building and they didn't really like me, and I pulled a gun. I saw they had a gun. I fired. They fired. Was that the first time you remember firing a gun? I think so. About how old were you then? Maybe about 16, 17. And how had you gotten that gun that you used for that Coney Island shooting? I don't remember. What other shootings do you remember having committed under the age of 18? I remember being with somebody and in Staten Island where my mom lived, and he fired shots into a crowd of people in front of a building, a crowd of guys. And was anyone hit? Yes. Do you know who? Yes. And was that person injured? Yes. Did that person live? Yes. And what about the Coney Island shooting? Was anyone hit in that shooting as far as you know? I'm not sure. Do you ever remember firing a gun on any other occasion under the age of 18? No. Did you ever fire a gun in the vicinity of West Brighton? Yes. Where is West Brighton? West Brighton is a neighborhood on Staten Island where I would go hang out, and I was walking through a park with some friends, and one of them had a gun, and I tested it and fired into a store. Did you hit anybody when you did that? Not that I'm aware of. About how old were you when that happened? Around that age. What? Between probably 17, 18-ish. Now, all of these crimes you've described having committed under the age of 18, did you get caught for any of those? No. Did you serve any time as a juvenile in any facility? Did a lot of on and off time on Rikers Island in adolescent facility. For what offenses? Not for that, for petty thefts and things like that. Some of the other crimes you described having done? Yes. You never got caught for any of the shootings? No. Did you go to school when you were a child? Yes. How far did you go in school? About the 9th grade. So you didn't graduate? No. At what age did you stop going to school? Maybe around 18. And what grade were you in at age 18? Still in 9th. So why did you leave school? Was just wasting time. Did you continue committing crimes after you turned 18? Yes. What types of crimes were you committing right around the time you turned 18? Like I said, I was involved in petty larcenies and started selling small amounts of drugs and robberies. And were you possessing guns around this time? Yes. Have you ever been convicted of a shoplifting offense? Yes. And how many times? A lot back then. And how many different states? In 2. Which states? New York and New Jersey. And how did it come to be that you were shoplifting in New Jersey? Myself and friends of mine from school back then would take trips to go different places to steal to be able to make some money. Now, did there come a time when you were convicted of robbery? Yes. What did you do that led you to be convicted of that crime? I was with some friends. We met up downtown Brooklyn, a bunch of kids I knew from throughout the city that went to different schools with me. We decided that day we were going to go stealing in Queens, and we went to a store and attempted to steal some stuff. I didn't steal anything. I walked out the store. Some of us ran out the store. The guy locked the door. A couple of my friends got caught in. The police came. We ran down the train station. Some got away, some got caught. I was one of the ones that got caught. I was charged with robbery. Did you have anything on you? I had a box cutter on me. Why did you have a box cutter on you? We used to keep box cutters to intimidate security guards and cut the alarms off. Had you used a box cutter that day? No. When you were arrested, what name did you give? Jermaine Wilson. What name is that? A name that I came up with that day. Why did you give a fake name? Hoping that I would just be released, something like that. Were you just released? No. What year was this, by the way? I think it was around 1995 or 96. How old were you? About, I think, 17 maybe. Did there come a time when you pled guilty to a crime as a result of that arrest? Yes. What did you plead guilty to? I pled guilty to robbery in the 1st degree. And what was your sentence? 3 to 6 years. Did you actually commit a robbery? No. Why did you plead guilty to robbery then? It was recommended by the attorney I had, and I was at that time scared to go to trial and take chances and get a longer sentence. Did you ever actually commit a robbery? Have I ever actually committed a robbery? Yes. Yes. How many robberies have you committed? I remember one. And around when did you commit that actual robbery? After I pled guilty to the robbery, I had 5 days left before I had to turn myself in, and I committed one during that time. And why would you do that? I was just upset about the whole thing, and I had somebody I was upset at. So describe what you did to commit that robbery. I walked into a grocery store where I knew the owner, and I went in there with a gun and pulled it out and demanded he empty the register and give me the money he had on him, and hit him in the head with the gun and left. Did you get any money from that robbery? Yes. How much? Somewhere around $2,000-$3,000. And were you ever caught for that robbery? No. When did you start serving your sentence on that robbery conviction that you got? 5 days later. Do you remember the year? In 97, November 97. And about how long did you serve in jail? About 4 years. Did you commit any crimes when you were in jail? Yes. What kind of crimes? Possessed weapons, assaults. Who did you assault? Other inmates, officers. What kind of weapons did you possess? Knives and cantops and stuff like that. During these fights that you got in jail, did you injure anybody? I'm sorry? Did you injure anybody during these fights you got in jail? Yes. How many people? I don't remember. Was anyone ever injured seriously? Don't think so. Were you ever injured while you were in jail? Yes. What happened? I was sliced. Who sliced you? A gang member from jail. And where were you sliced? In my face. Do you know why you were sliced? I had issues with a couple of members of their gang. What gang was that? The Bloods. Were you a member of any gang? No. Have you ever been? I used to be affiliated with them, some guys from the neighborhood, and just used to hang out with them, but I never was initiated or took an oath or anything like that. When you say affiliated with them, what gang? The Bloods. And when you say the neighborhood, what do you mean? From the neighborhoods that I was associated with, Crown Heights, Brooklyn, West Brighton, and Staten Island. When did you get out of prison? 2001. Were you on parole when you got out? Yes. When you were released from prison, did you return to committing crimes? Yes. What crimes? Possessing weapons, selling drugs. What kind of drugs were you selling? Ecstasy, marijuana, then led to crack cocaine. All right, so let's talk about first the drug sales right when you got out of jail. Which drugs did you start selling first? Marijuana and ecstasy. And about when? How soon after you got out of jail? Within a year. Where were you selling? Staten Island and Brooklyn. And what kinds of quantities of marijuana were you selling? Ounces, a pound here and there. How often were you selling these quantities? Pretty much every day. So you were selling an ounce every day? Probably more than that. What kind of profits were you making off of the marijuana? I don't remember. What about ecstasy? How much ecstasy were you selling? Anywhere from 1 pill to a couple hundred pills at a time. How often? Every day, every couple days, depending when people call. What kinds of profits were you making off of the ecstasy? That time, might sell a pill for $20 retail to $7 wholesale, something like that. So what time period? I'm talking years now. Were you selling marijuana and ecstasy from when to when? Maybe 01, 02 to 03. Were you selling those drugs with anyone or by yourself? Pretty much by myself. How much money were you making in profit just in generally per week? What were you clearing? I don't remember off of that. Can you give me a rough estimate? A couple thousand a week. Did you carry a gun while you were selling drugs during that time in 2001, 2002? Yes. Why? For safety. What does that mean? Why would you carry a gun while you're selling drugs? For protection in case somebody tries to rob me or something like that. Were you on parole at the time? Yes. Did you ever tell your parole officer that you were selling drugs? No. Why not? Get me violated. Did you ever get your parole violated as a result of selling drugs during this period? I'm talking 02, 01, 02. Yes. Can you describe what happened? I was driving through a subdivision and the police saw me, made a U-turn, tried to follow me, and I jumped out of the car, threw the gun, tried to go in the house I was going to, but they caught up to me in time and arrested me, searched the area, found the gun, arrested me. And what happened as a result of that arrest? My parole was violated. Did you get a conviction also, or just a parole violation? I got a conviction. What was the conviction for, do you remember? The conviction was for the drugs, and the weapon became inoperable, so I don't know if I took a charge for the inoperable weapon, but I also got a parole violation for that. What happened as a result of the parole violation? I was sent to Willard, which is a boot camp program. Is that jail? Well, it's a prison, but it's a boot camp prison. And what happened at the boot camp? I completed it. What's the purpose of a boot camp? It's like being in the military, I guess. Strict rules and things you got to follow. A lot of officers were ex-military. It was ran just like military. How long were you in boot camp? A little under 4 months. Do you remember what year it was that you got out? No. Can you estimate? Maybe '02, '03. Did you continue to sell drugs after you returned home from the boot camp? Yes. What kind of drugs? Crack cocaine. How did you start selling crack cocaine? Started buying it and bagging it up, selling it to addicts in the neighborhood. Were you selling by yourself or with someone? First started with someone. We would go shop together to go buy the drugs, and then we eventually went our ways and I would sell myself. What's the name of the person you were selling with? His name was Andre Ames or Adams. Mr. Stewart, how long did you sell crack cocaine for? At that period? At that period. Maybe under a year. And how much were you selling per week? How much drugs or how much money? How much drugs? Maybe a couple 100 grams a week. And how much profit were you clearing each week? Rough estimate. Maybe about 5 to 10 grand a week. And did there come a time when you were arrested for possessing crack cocaine? Yes. Do you remember the year? Maybe '03. Can you describe the circumstances of that arrest? Yeah, I was pulled over and my car was searched, and I was searched, and the drugs were found. What happened when the drugs were found? I was arrested. What happened? Did anything happen after you were arrested? Yeah. What did you do? I offered the officers to keep the money on me and to let me give them another $10,000 and to let me go. How much money was on you? A couple grand. So you offered the officers a bribe? Yes. Did they take the bribe? No. What happened? At the time when we were talking, he was trying to get information from me, and I was just trying to offer him money to let me go. And I didn't give any information, and he didn't take any money, and he charged me with bribery. You were charged with bribery. Were you charged with anything in addition to bribery? Possession of a weapon. Possession of a weapon? I mean possession of drugs, sorry. Of the crack cocaine? Yes. Do you remember how much crack cocaine it was? No. Did you plead guilty as a result of that arrest? Yes. What did you plead guilty to? Bribe. I think I pled guilty to a misdemeanor drug charge. Do you believe you pled guilty to the bribery? I can't recall. I don't think so. I don't know. No? I don't know. During this period, let's talk 2001 to 2003. Were you involved in any violent incidents? Yes. About how many? I remember one right now. Can you briefly describe the one violent incident that you remember participating in during that period of time? Yes. I was in a club, and there were 2 sets of girls from neighborhoods that I knew fighting, and I tried to separate them from fighting, and some older guys were there, and they tried to promote the fight and kind of started picking one with me. And when I left the club, they waited for me, and we started to fight. They tried to jump me. I picked up a bottle, started fighting with the bottle, and next thing I know, one of them starts shooting at me. I left and went and called some friends of mine, and we went to their projects and started shooting at them. Who started shooting? We did. Did you? Yes, I was one of the shooters. How many other people were shooting? About 3 or 4 guys with me. And what area did this happen in? This was in Staten Island, Mariners Harbor. What was the name of the person that you were shooting at? Jaborn. Is that his real name? It's the name I know him as. I think it's his street name. Was this someone you had already known before that day? No. You just met that person that day? That night. That night. What were the names of people who were shooting along with you? Kid from Jamaica. I forgot the other kids' names right now. Do you know if anyone was hit during that shootout? No. You don't know, or no one was hit? I don't know. Now, around the same time, again, 2001 to 2003, were you yourself shot? Yes. Can you describe briefly what happened in connection with that incident? One of my friends' house was burglarized, and I knew the guy's kid who did it, and I didn't like it, and we were having back and forth words about it. And one night I saw him, and I went to the house, got my gun, came back, saw them walking, jumped out of the car and fired, and they started firing back, and I got hit. Where did you get hit? In the foot. And what were the names of the people you were shooting at? I know two of the guys that were involved on their side shooting back at me was a guy named Top Dog and Wayno. Are those their real names or nicknames? Names we know them as in the street. Where did this happen? Staten Island. Any particular part of Staten Island? New Brighton. Now, Mr. Stewart, did you get arrested in July 2003 for another incident involving a police officer? Yes. Can you describe what happened that led you to get arrested in that? I was driving through a toll booth with a suspended license, and I was on my cell phone, and the toll booth clerk told me that I wasn't supposed to be on the phone and to pull over. I pulled over. He called the police officer. He asked me for my license. I didn't have one. I gave him false information and gave him my little brother's name information. And he also wanted the keys to the car. And I told him no. I gave my information just to go ahead and run the information. And he was persistent on wanting the keys, so he reached in the car, tried to take them. I didn't want to let him get the keys. It became a scuffle. Him leaning in the car window, it looked like he started reaching back for his gun. I put the car in drive and tried to drive off with him still in the car. He eventually let go and fell out the car. I drove a little bit further and decided to get out of the car, leave the car, and ran off the highway on foot. Were you caught? Yes. How long after were you caught? Maybe 20 minutes later. Were you arrested? Yes. How long was the police officer hanging out of the window of the car that you were driving in? Not long, maybe 20 seconds, maybe. And what part of the road was this happening on? On the highway between the partition, between the two toll booths, the white lines going into a lane, rather the exit of a lane. Did you see what happened to the police officer after he dropped out of your car? No, I just saw him on the floor. Do you know whether he was injured? I think he reported injuries. Did he survive? Yes. Were you charged with any crime as a result of this? Yes. What crime? I know I was charged with a number of them. Obstruction of justice. I think I was charged with assault, and I don't remember all of them. Did you plead guilty to any offense as a result of this? Yes. What was that? Obstruction of justice, and there was one more. I'm not sure what it was. Was it reckless endangerment? Yes, reckless endangerment. Did you receive a sentence? Yes. What did you get? I think I took a plea and then 2 misdemeanors and got 9 months in jail for that. Did you serve that time? Yes. Mr. Stewart, have you ever been convicted of driving-related offenses? Yes. What types of offenses? Suspended license, riding with stolen license plate. And are these all the things that you've done? Yes.